The fine notice was sitting under my front door on a Tuesday morning. Crisp white envelope, official HOA letterhead. The kind of document that has been designed specifically to look more authoritative than the people sending it actually are. I had been living in Birchwood Commons for 12 years. 12 years of paying dues on time, keeping my driveway clean, mowing on schedule, never once giving anyone a reason to knock on my door with a clipboard. And here was a $150 fine, citing a violation of community aesthetic standards, specifically, the visible disorganization of my garage interior as observed from the public right-of-way. I read that line 3 times. Visible disorganization of my garage interior. The garage that for the past 7 months had been packed floor to ceiling with someone else's property. Property that belonged to Beverly Crane, president of the Birchwood Commons Homeowners Association. The same woman whose signature was printed at the bottom of the violation notice I was now holding in my hand. I set the envelope down on my kitchen table next to my coffee mug, and sat there for a long moment looking at it. Not angry exactly, something quieter than anger. The particular stillness that settles over a man when he realizes that the situation in front of him has just clarified itself completely, and that everything he needs to do next is suddenly obvious. I picked up my phone. I opened the Notes app, and I started writing down every date I could remember. My name is Ray Kowalski. I am 57 years old. I spent 31 years working as a licensed master electrician, the last 14 of those running my own crew across central Ohio. I retired 18 months ago, not because I had to, but because I had earned it, and because my knees had opinions about ladders that I was starting to respect. I live alone in a 3-bedroom ranch house on Sycamore Bend in Birchwood Commons, a development of 93 homes on the western edge of Columbus. My garage is, without exaggeration, the thing I am most proud of in my life after my 2 kids. Floor-mounted tool chests, wall-mounted panel boards, with every circuit labeled, a workbench I built myself, from reclaimed oak that has been perfectly level for 11 years. Overhead storage racks I designed and installed in a single weekend. The floor is sealed concrete, gray with a subtle texture, clean enough that I have eaten lunch off it on more than one occasion, not because I had to, but because I wanted to make a point to myself about standards. My 2001 Ford F-250, which runs better now than it did when I bought it, because I have replaced everything in it at least once with my own hands, lives in that garage. It fits perfectly. There is exactly 8 inches of clearance on each side, and I know this because I measured it when I first pulled it in, and I have thought about those 8 inches with satisfaction many times since. Beverly Crane had been HOA board president for 5 years. She was 63. Recently semi-retired from a career in county permit administration, which explained both her comfort with bureaucratic language and her apparent belief that the world existed primarily to be regulated. She drove a pearl-white Cadillac that she kept cleaner than most people keep their living rooms. She wore blazers in weather that did not require blazers. She had the particular manner of a person who has spent decades in positions of minor institutional authority and has slowly come to believe that minor institutional authority is the same thing as actual power. Her husband Gerald tended the front garden with the focused devotion of a man who had discovered long ago that the garden asked nothing of him except attention, which was a considerably better arrangement than most of the other things in his life. I respected Gerald. Gerald had found his equilibrium. I had not yet found mine, but I was working on it. The HOA board had 5 members. 3 of them voted the way Beverly pointed. One of them, Hal Mercer, 69 years old, retired building inspector. Forearms that looked like they had been assembled from spare parts at a construction site, had been sitting at the far end of the board table for 3 years, waiting for something specific to happen. He had read the governing documents cover to cover, twice, and had underlined things. I know this because he told me so, quietly, in a parking lot, 6 weeks before any of this became the story I am telling you now. He said, and I am giving you his exact words, because they have stayed with me. I am not in a hurry, Ray. Patient men win more than people think. Hal Mercer is important. He becomes very important. Keep him in mind. Here is what you need to understand about Beverly Crane before I tell you how she ended up with 8 months of her property in my garage. She operated Birchwood Commons on a 2-tier system. She would have denied this if you asked her. She would have cited the uniform application of community standards and the importance of consistent enforcement. But the reality was visible to anyone who had lived here long enough to notice. The north side of the development, larger homes, two-car garages with decorative hardware, cars that had been purchased new within the last 4 years, received what I can only describe as collegial enforcement. A friendly knock on the door, a casual mention over the fence, a phone call first. The south side, smaller ranch houses, work trucks, guys like me, who had spent 3 decades earning calluses, received certified mail and administrative fees. I had confirmed this pattern by comparing notes with 4 other South Side residents over the course of 2 Saturday mornings in Walt Gibney's driveway. Walt was 73, former rural mail carrier, 34 years delivering to every address in a 12-mile radius, and retained spatial and behavioral information about this neighborhood with a precision that most surveillance systems would envy. Walt had been watching Beverly Crane for 4 years and had opinions that were both extensive and extremely well-sourced. My first direct conflict with Beverly had come 14 months before the garage situation. My nephew and I had spent a long weekend rebuilding the carburetor on his truck in my driveway. The truck ran. It ran well. It was not pretty, but it was mechanically sound, and I had the diagnostic printout to prove it. Beverly did not knock. Beverly did not call. Beverly sent certified mail citing Section 12, Clause 4 of the Birchwood Commons Governing Charter, prohibiting the sustained visible repair of vehicles in residential driveways. The fine was $90 plus a $25 administrative fee. I paid it. I moved my nephew's truck around the block to prove to nobody in particular that it ran fine, and I filed the receipt in a folder I kept in the second drawer of my kitchen desk, the one I had labeled, with the optimism of a man who hopes he will never need it, Birchwood Complaints. That folder had 3 documents in it at that point. It would eventually have considerably more. Beverly appeared at my door on a Sunday afternoon in late February, carrying a plate of store-bought cookies still in the clamshell container, with the sale sticker partially peeled from the lid. She was smiling the smile that did not reach her eyes, the one that existed independently of anything she was actually feeling, and was deployed as a social instrument rather than an expression. She explained that she was having a contractor come through to clear out her bonus room for a renovation project. She needed a temporary place to store a few boxes. Just a few weeks, she said. 3 at the most. She held out the cookie plate. I looked at the cookies. I looked at the smile. I said yes. I want to be honest with you about this moment, because I think it matters. I said yes not because I was naive. I said yes because I am a person who believes that neighbors help each other, and that the belief itself is worth preserving, even when the specific neighbor in question has sent you certified mail about your nephew's carburetor. I should have asked what a few boxes meant. I should have asked for it in writing. I should have handed her a cookie back and closed the door with the warm finality of a man who has learned his lesson. Instead, I said yes, and the next morning, at 6:55 a.m., a moving truck rumbled down Sycamore Bend, loud enough to rattle the coffee mug off my kitchen counter. 19 boxes came off that truck. Not a few. 19. Then a commercial clothing rack, the kind with wheels and a horizontal hanging bar, loaded with fabric-wrapped items. Then a rolled Persian rug that required 2 men and a furniture dolly to move, and that smelled, when they carried it past me, like cedar and something older underneath it. The particular smell of things that have been stored for a long time in spaces that were not quite right for them. Then a treadmill, not a consumer model, the kind of heavy-framed commercial unit you find in a hotel fitness room. The 2 movers worked efficiently and without conversation, and were gone in 40 minutes. I stood in my garage afterward and looked at what had just happened to it. The treadmill was against the back wall where my second workbench used to be. The clothing rack was along the left side, occupying the space where I staged parts during projects. The 19 boxes were stacked in configurations that had been designed to fit the maximum volume into the available floor space, rather than to leave me any room to function. The Persian rug had been unrolled in the center of the floor, and was taking up approximately 40 square feet of sealed concrete that I had spent 2 weekends preparing 3 years ago. I could still get to my tool chests. I could not get my truck inside. I stood there for a long time looking at it. Then I went inside and wrote the date in my notes app, 2 weeks became a month. A month became 3. I sent 2 text messages asking for an update on the timeline. Both were read. Neither received a response. By month 4, I was paying my neighbor's son $40 a week to let me keep my truck in his parents' driveway 2 streets over. $40 a week. I wrote every payment in my notes app, with the date and the amount. By month 5, I had paid out $720 to park my own truck, away from my own garage. By month 6, the boxes had settled into the space in a way that suggested they had no intention of leaving. The clothing rack had developed a slight lean against my east wall panel board. The Persian rug had collected a thin layer of garage dust along its edges that told me what I already knew, which was that nobody had been in here to check on any of this, or had any current intention of removing it. I sent a 3rd text message. Read receipt appeared within 4 minutes. No response arrived within 4 weeks. The morning I found the fine notice under my door, I had been awake since 5:15, because that is when I wake up, and because the particular quiet of a November morning in Ohio is the kind that makes a man think clearly, whether he wants to or not. I read the notice. I read it again. I poured a 2nd cup of coffee. I pulled on my boots and walked into the garage, and stood there in the cold, with the notice in one hand and the mug in the other, looking at Beverly Crane's property, filling the space where my truck belonged, where my workbench had been, where I had spent 12 years building something that worked exactly the way I needed it to work. My breath made small clouds in the air. The overhead light caught the dust on the Persian rug. Somewhere under the cedar smell, I could just barely find the machine oil and solder smell that was supposed to be all this space smelled like. I made a decision in that moment that had nothing to do with anger. Anger is loud and imprecise, and leaves evidence of itself in places you do not want evidence. What I made was a decision, calm, specific, and entirely reversible, up until the moment it was not. I went back inside, got my phone, and started documenting. I photographed every item in the garage, every box, every label visible on those boxes, every corner of the clothing rack, the treadmill, the rug. I photographed the garage from the doorway, showing the full extent of the occupancy. I photographed the fine notice next to my mailbox with the date visible. I screenshotted both text messages I had sent Beverly, with the read receipts and timestamps clearly showing. I pulled up my notes app and typed out a complete chronological account of everything from the Sunday afternoon cookie visit through the current morning, every date I could confirm, every dollar I had paid to park my truck elsewhere. Then I found a legal pad in my desk drawer, yellow, college ruled, and rewrote the entire timeline by hand, because I had spent 31 years in a trade where written records and handwritten logs are 2 different kinds of documentation, and both matter. The legal pad became the most important object in my house over the next 3 months, though I did not know that yet. I only knew that it felt right to write things down. It is the instinct of a man who has spent his life working with systems that require precision, who has learned that the job site dispute you lose is almost always the one where the other guy had the paperwork, and you were relying on memory. That same afternoon, I walked to Beverly's door and hand-delivered a written note. 1 page, single-spaced, polite in tone, and precise in content. I explained that per the HOA's own violation notice, my garage needed to be cleared of all stored items immediately. I requested reimbursement of the $150 fine on the grounds that the cited condition had been caused entirely by property belonging to the board president. I requested reimbursement of the $720 in documented parking costs. I gave her 14 days to respond and to arrange removal. I kept a copy. I noted the date and time of delivery on the legal pad. What came back was not a response to me. What came back was an email to the full HOA board distribution list, with me copied, which I appreciated, because copying me on things is always a gift to my documentation, informing the board that Ray Kowalski had become hostile and uncooperative, and was refusing to honor a verbal community agreement regarding temporary storage assistance. She used the word disruptive twice. She mentioned neither the fine she had issued me, nor the 7 months of free storage, nor the $40 a week I had been paying since April. I circled the next HOA board meeting on my kitchen calendar. It was the first meeting I had planned to attend in 11 years of living in Birchwood Commons. The community center on a Wednesday night carries a specific smell: burnt coffee, an institutional carpet, and the faint trace of every contentious meeting that has ever been held in a room with fluorescent lights and folding chairs. There were 14 residents scattered across the seating when I arrived. Beverly was at the front table in the blazer, running the agenda with the smooth authority of a person who has made peace with the sound of her own voice. She did not look at me when I came in. I sat 3 rows back with my legal pad and waited. When public comments opened, I stood up and read from a prepared statement. No raised voice, no editorial commentary, just dates and dollar amounts, and the specific clause number from the violation notice. 7 months of occupancy, 19 boxes, 1 treadmill, 1 clothing rack, 1 Persian rug, $720 in displaced parking, $150 fine issued by the board member whose property was the direct cause of the cited condition. I set a copy of the statement on the board table and sat back down. The coffee maker in the corner dripped twice. That was the only sound in the room for approximately 4 seconds. At the far end of the board table, Hal Mercer leaned forward very slowly, placed both forearms on the table, and looked down the row at Beverly, with the expression of a man watching a chess position he predicted 3 years ago finally materialize on the board in front of him. Beverly thanked me for my input and pivoted to the next agenda item without a pause. Pure glacial control, not a ripple. But something had happened in that room. The kind of thing that does not make a sound, but changes the air pressure noticeably to anyone who is paying attention. In the parking lot afterward, gravel underfoot, the November cold, sharp enough to see breath, she appeared at my elbow. Voice low, blazer somehow still crisp at 9:45 at night. She said she would hate for a property reassessment request to find its way to the county office. She said these things happen sometimes, seemingly at random. She said she was sure a man of my experience understood that some situations were better resolved quietly between neighbors than escalated unnecessarily. I looked at her for a moment in the parking lot light. I said, "Good to know." I got in my truck, which was parked 2 streets away, because I still could not fit it in my own garage, walked there in the cold, and drove home. The whole way back, I was thinking about the moving truck, the one that had shown up at 6:55 in the morning, in late February, with 19 boxes and 2 movers who worked without speaking. I had noted the truck company name out of habit, the habit of a man who reads signage automatically, the same way an electrician reads panel labels without deciding to. When I got home, I ran the company name through Ohio's Public Business Registry. The trucking company was a registered LLC. I kept going. The registered agent for the trucking company's primary client account, the account that had paid for my February delivery, was listed in the associated filing documents as Beverly A. Crane. The business name was Crane Interiors LLC. I sat at my kitchen table with the legal pad open in front of me and wrote that name down in capital letters and underlined it 3 times. Then I sat back and let it settle. Because what that name meant was that there had been no bonus room renovation. There had been no personal remodel. Crane Interiors LLC was a registered business. Beverly had not been clearing out her house. She had been clearing out commercial inventory, staging furniture, business property belonging to a for-profit enterprise that she operated out of her home. She had used my residential garage as a free commercial warehouse for 7 months, issued me a fine for the clutter it created, and threatened me with a county property reassessment when I asked for my money back. She had done all of this with the confidence of a person who has never once been required to answer for anything. I called Sal Ferrano at 9:20 that night. Sal is a paralegal I have known since high school, the kind of friend who picks up on the second ring when you say it is actually important, and who has spent 23 years developing the specific skill set of knowing exactly which question to ask and exactly which statute to look up afterward. I told him what I had found. There was a pause on the line. Then Sal said, slowly, and with the particular care of a man measuring his words, "Ray, that is a genuinely interesting set of facts." He told me he would call me back in the morning. He called at 7:40. I was already up, legal pad open, second coffee in hand. He did not waste time. He walked me through Ohio Revised Code Section 11333.41, the possessory lien statute, which gives a person who has involuntarily become a storage custodian a legal claim against the stored property itself when documented costs have been incurred and a proper cure period has elapsed without compliance. He explained the notice requirements, the 14-day cure window, the documentation standards. Then he said something that I have thought about many times since. He said, "Your notes are unusually good, Ray. Most people in this situation have a phone full of angry texts and nothing else. You have dates, dollar amounts, a timeline, and a business registration. That is a different kind of conversation entirely." I wrote section 133.3.41 in a box on the legal pad. Then I wrote underneath it, "She stored commercial inventory in my residential garage, without disclosure or compensation, while operating a registered business. That is not a neighbor disagreement. That is something else." Sal drafted the formal demand letter that week. It went out via certified mail with return receipt. It covered the 7 months of unauthorized commercial storage, the $870 in documented direct costs, and formal notice of intent to exercise possessory lien rights under Ohio law if full reimbursement and removal did not occur within 14 calendar days. I tracked the delivery. The green card came back signed 3 days later. I put it in the legal pad folder. Then I waited. Beverly did not call. Beverly did not knock. Beverly sent a message to the HOA board distribution list, copying me again, stating that she had received a harassing legal communication from a neighbor and would be consulting her attorney. 3 days after that, Hal Mercer texted me. 2 words. Emergency meeting. I went. Beverly had called a special session without the required 48-hour advance notice to homeowners, without a posted agenda, with a phone chain invitation to her 3 reliable votes. She was attempting to pass an emergency resolution authorizing the board president to negotiate and settle property disputes on behalf of homeowners. Hal objected before she finished reading the motion. He cited the governing document provisions by chapter and section number from memory. He cited the quorum requirements. He cited the specific bylaw language prohibiting emergency sessions without documented cause. Beverly overruled him and pushed the vote through. 4-1. Hal had been recording on his phone since before the meeting was called to order. He told me in the parking lot after, cold air and exhaust fumes, that he had kept his phone charged to full battery before every single board meeting for the past 2 years. He said, "I figured she'd eventually do something worth keeping." No satisfaction in his voice. Just a man who had done his reading and his waiting in exactly the right order. I filed the audio recording in the legal pad folder, next to the certified mail receipt. Then I went home and, for the first time since the February morning the moving truck showed up, I felt something close to calm. Not because anything had been resolved. Nothing had been resolved. Beverly's property was still in my garage. My truck was still 2 streets away. The $150 fine was still officially on my record. But the folder on my kitchen table was starting to look like something. Not a complaint, not a grudge, a case. And I had spent 31 years learning the difference. The 14-day cure period expired on a Thursday. I know the exact day because I had written the deadline in red ink on my kitchen calendar. The same afternoon the certified mail went out, and I had looked at that date every morning while drinking my coffee with the particular attention of a man who understands that deadlines are not suggestions. They are the moment when the rules change. Beverly did not call. Beverly did not arrange removal. Beverly did not send Gerald to my door with a check and a pained expression. What Beverly sent, at 11:47 on the final night of the cure period, was a text message. 8 words. "Ray, I'll be in touch about this soon." I read it standing in my kitchen in the dark, with my phone screen the only light in the room. 8 words. After 7 months of free commercial storage. After $870 in documented costs. After a formal legal notice on paralegal letterhead sent via certified mail with a confirmed delivery signature. 8 words at 11:47 at night, with a read receipt already sitting on my 2 earlier texts, like quiet evidence of a person who had been receiving my communications clearly and choosing not to respond to them. I set my phone face down on the counter. I picked up the legal pad. I wrote the time, the date, and the full text of the message. Underneath it I wrote 3 words of my own. She thinks this is still her game. Then I went to bed. I slept better than I had in months. Not because anything was finished, because everything was finally in position. I called Sal the next morning at 7:15. He confirmed what I already knew. The cure period had elapsed without compliance. My possessory lien rights under Ohio Revised Code Section 11333.41 were fully activated. Disposal through reasonable means was legally permissible to recover documented costs. He walked me through the specifics one more time, with the patience of a man who understands that precision matters more than speed. The documented costs, the parking payments, the wrongfully issued fine, and a conservative fair market estimate for 7 months of climate-adjacent residential storage at going Columbus rates put my total recoverable amount at well over the assessed value of the staged furniture and boxes sitting in my garage. I was not stealing. I was not retaliating. I was exercising a legal right to collect a debt using the only asset available. Sal said, "Make sure you do a full video walkthrough before the first person touches anything." Timestamped. Every item on camera. Narrated. I already had the camera ready. I had charged it the night before. That is the instinct of a man who has spent 3 decades on job sites where the thing that protects you is always the thing you prepared before you needed it. I also filed the small claims complaint that morning through Ohio's electronic filing portal, which accepts submissions any time of day because administrative justice, whatever its other limitations, does not observe business hours. The claim was specific and clean. $870. The fine plus 5 months of the most clearly documented parking costs. I kept it well under the threshold that would extend the hearing timeline. Filing confirmation printed and placed in the legal pad folder. Then I made 3 phone calls. The first was to Hal Mercer. I told him what I was planning and why it was legal. Hal listened without interrupting for approximately 4 minutes. The silence of a man cross-referencing what he is hearing against a governing document he has memorized, and then said, "I will be available by phone all evening." That was Hal's version of enthusiastic support, and I received it as such. The second call was to Walt Gibney. "Walt," I said, "tonight I am clearing the garage. Keep an eye on the street from Crane's direction." Walt said, already in my chair. It was 2 in the afternoon. Walt Gibney had been a rural mail carrier for 34 years and had developed a relationship with this neighborhood's geography and behavioral patterns that transcended ordinary observation. He did not watch the street the way a curious neighbor watches the street. He processed it. He noticed deviations from baseline with the automatic precision of a system that has been calibrated over decades. The third call was to Dana Pruitt. Dana was a reporter at the Westerville Courier who had covered 3 HOA governance disputes in the past 2 years, and who had, by professional reputation, a healthy and practiced resistance to sources being pressured into withdrawing their cooperation. I gave her a 15-minute briefing. I emailed her the key documents from the legal pad folder while we were still on the phone. She asked if there was a public meeting coming up she could attend. I told her there was an annual homeowners meeting in 5 weeks. She said she would put it on her calendar. I thanked her and hung up and sat for a moment in the quiet of my kitchen, thinking about the fact that a woman who had spent 7 months treating my garage like a personal storage facility was somewhere across the neighborhood, going about her evening, with no idea that everything she had put in motion was about to reach its conclusion without her participation. At 6:30 that evening, I did the video walkthrough. 92 seconds. Narrated. Every item visible, every label readable, the timestamp running continuously in the corner of the frame. I photographed the garage one final time from the doorway, full width, corner to corner. I uploaded everything to a cloud folder Sal had access to, and texted him the confirmation. At 8:58, I opened Facebook Marketplace on my phone and started typing. The listing took me 35 minutes to write, not because I was uncertain about what to say, but because I wanted every word to carry exactly the right weight. Free pickup tonight. Miscellaneous household and staging items. Boxes, framed artwork, decorative pillows, area rug, exercise equipment, clothing rack. First come, first served. No holds. Address provided via direct message. Gone by morning. I posted it at 9:22. 11 minutes later, I had 27 messages. What happened over the next 2 hours was, and I want to be precise about this, because precision is how I experience most things that matter to me. One of the more quietly satisfying sequences of events I have witnessed as an adult. A college student named Trevor arrived at 9:44 in a pickup truck with his roommate. both of them vibrating with the particular energy of people who have found something remarkable on a Wednesday night. They took the Persian rug, 2 men, a furniture dolly borrowed from the bed of the truck, and 4 minutes of efficient work, and the rug that had occupied my back corner for 7 months, and radiated the smell of cedar and other people's decisions, was gone before 10 o'clock. The treadmill went to a woman named Joanna, who had been trying to get back into a routine since her physical therapy ended, and who had brought her adult son to help move it. The son was in his mid-20s, did not speak, and worked with the focused efficiency of a young man who understands that his primary role in this situation is structural rather than conversational. They were gone in 9 minutes. The 19 boxes went in 3 separate waves. 2 families who believed they had stumbled onto an extraordinary free yard sale. A graduate student who took 6 boxes of what she described as really nice staging props, including framed prints, decorative objects, and fabric samples that she said would look amazing in her apartment. One man who took the entire clothing rack, still loaded, because he was opening a small alterations business and needed exactly that kind of rack and had never expected to find one for free on a Wednesday. He shook my hand when he left and said he hoped I had a good night. I told him I thought I probably would. By 11:20, the garage was empty. I stood in the center of it under the overhead light, boots on sealed concrete, the November cold pressing against the walls from outside. The cedar smell was gone. The machine oil and solder smell was coming back, faint at first. The way a room reasserts its own identity when the thing that had been displacing it is removed. The honest baseline of a space that belonged to me. I stood there for a while just breathing it in. 11 years of building exactly the right garage. 7 months of having it occupied by someone else's commercial inventory. And now, at 11:20 on a Wednesday night in November, it was mine again. Every inch of it. I turned off the light, went inside, made a cup of tea I did not particularly want, and drank it standing at the kitchen window, looking out at the dark garage. Somewhere across Birchwood Commons, Beverly Crane was asleep with a plan she believed was still intact, measuring cargo space in whatever version of confidence she carried into her dreams. By morning, there would be nothing left to measure. Walt texted me at 11:58. Everything quiet on Sycamore. I texted back. Good. Going to sleep. He sent a thumbs up. I put the phone on the nightstand and closed my eyes. Walt's texts began arriving at 7:19 the next morning. I was already up, and had been since 5:15. Coffee made, legal pad open, phone face up on the table. I had been waiting with the particular calm of a man who has completed his preparation, and is now simply observing the conclusion arrive on schedule. The white Cadillac pulled up at 7:21. Beverly walked to my side gate, opened it, went to the garage. Walt reported the garage door going up at 7:23. Then nothing for 4 minutes. Just Walt watching, coffee in hand. A woman standing in an empty garage trying to make her brain accept information it was not prepared to receive. She went back to the Cadillac at 7:27, sat inside. Walt could see her on her phone, typing, not calling. The kind of fast-pressured typing that is never the beginning of anything good. She went back to the garage at 7:30. Stood in the doorway for approximately 2 minutes, picked up a small tool from my wall panel board, looked at it, put it back, stood there again, left at 7:34, did not knock on my door, did not ring the bell, walked back to the Cadillac with the particular posture of a person whose internal systems are running emergency recalibration processes that they are not yet ready to externalize. Drove away. Walt's final text read, "She didn't look right, Ray." I finished my coffee. I poured a second. I waited for what I knew was coming. It came at 7:48. 14 text messages in 11 minutes, arriving in a cluster with the compressed urgency of a weather system that has been building pressure for 7 months and has finally found somewhere to go. The first 3 were clipped and formal. The 4th asked directly what I had done with her property. By the 7th message, the capitalization had started. By the 10th, she had used the phrase, "I will have you arrested for the first time." It appeared again in messages 12 and 14. I screenshotted every message without responding. I forwarded the screenshots to Sal. Sal replied in 8 minutes. "Do not answer. Let her keep going." At 9:15, a Columbus Police Department patrol officer knocked on my front door. Non-emergency response. He was pleasant, and had the professional bearing of a man who had assessed the situation before arriving, and had already categorized it correctly. I invited him in. I put the legal pad on the kitchen table and walked him through the entire timeline from the beginning. The certified demand letter with the confirmed delivery signature, the photographs of every item time-stamped from day one, the lien notice, the violation notice Beverly had issued me, the 14 text messages from this morning, already printed because I had done that at 8 o'clock, the audio recording from the illegal emergency board meeting, the Crane Interiors LLC business registration pulled from Ohio's public records, the governing document clause I had found 3 weeks earlier. The officer reviewed everything with the systematic attention of someone who knows the difference between documentation and complaint. He made a brief call, came back, and said this appeared to be a civil matter and that I would want to speak with an attorney. He handed me a card. I thanked him. He left. Through my kitchen window, I could see Beverly's Cadillac parked across the street. It sat there for 6 more minutes after the officer drove away. Then it pulled out slowly, and I watched it go, and felt nothing in particular, except the clean and specific satisfaction of a man whose paperwork is in order. By noon, Beverly had posted in the Birchwood Commons neighborhood Facebook group. She was careful. She did not use my name directly. She wrote that a neighbor had taken advantage of a good faith situation, and that valuable personal property had been removed without consent. She used the word predatory twice. She posted a photograph taken through my open garage door showing the empty space. She asked whether other community members had experienced similar behavior. I read it on my phone, sitting on my wooden stool in the newly empty garage, surrounded by clean air that smelled entirely like mine again. Within 30 minutes, the post had 19 comments. 5 were sympathetic to Beverly, the rubber stamps, and their immediate social network performing their function on schedule. 8 were confused, asking for clarification she could not provide without revealing details that would immediately incriminate her. And 6, including one from Hal Mercer, who had clearly been watching the thread with the patience of a man who has been patient about most things in this situation for a very long time, were asking pointed and specific questions she had no safe way to answer. Hal's comment was 7 sentences. He said there was quite a bit of documented context to this situation that had not been shared. He said he was happy to provide it privately to anyone who was interested. He said he would not post it publicly without permission, but wanted the community to know there were 2 sides to this story, and that the side which had not yet been told was considerably more complete. He did not raise his voice. He did not make accusations. He simply opened a door and waited to see who would walk through it. 22 people clicked the interested reaction within 30 minutes. Beverly deleted the post. Hal had the screenshot before it disappeared. So did I. So did, it turned out, 9 other neighbors who had been watching the thread with quick fingers, and the alert attention of people who have suspected for a long time that something was not quite right in how this neighborhood was being managed, and were now beginning to understand that their suspicion had been correct. 6 days later, a letter arrived from an attorney named Harold Fry, of Fry & Associates, Real Estate and Closing Services, office address on the north side of Columbus. The letter was on heavy cream stationery, and deployed the word "herein" 4 times in the first paragraph, and the phrase, "without further delay," twice in the second, which is how you recognize legal correspondence that is designed to communicate authority rather than actually exercise it. It claimed that Ray Kowalski had unlawfully converted personal property belonging to Beverly Crane. It demanded replacement value for all removed items, which Beverly had assessed at $4,200. It threatened civil action. I scanned it and emailed it to Sal before I finished my coffee. Sal called back in 11 minutes. I could hear in his voice the particular register of a man who is suppressing amusement for professional reasons. Harold Fry, he said, is a real estate closing attorney. He does purchase contracts and title transfers. He has not filed a contested civil litigation case in Franklin County in over 5 years. This letter is theater, Ray. Good stationery, but theater. What do I do? Nothing yet. Write down today's date. Let her spend the money on Harold Fry. I wrote down the date. Then underneath it I wrote, she is paying a closing attorney to write intimidating letters. She is scared. That observation, that Beverly was scared, was more useful to me than anything else that had happened in the past week. Scared people make mistakes. Scared people overreach. And overreach, as I had learned thoroughly by this point, generates documentation. I had built this entire situation, one piece of documentation at a time. I was not going to stop now. I spent the following 10 days building the binder. Physical, 3-ring, tabbed. The kind of object you place on a table when you want the other side to understand immediately, before a single word is spoken, that you have been more organized about this than they have been about anything. Tab 1. All photographs timestamped from day 1 through the night of the listing. Tab 2. The certified demand letter and the green return receipt card. Tab 3. Both text message chains. The 2 unanswered polite ones from months earlier, and the 14-message cluster from the morning Beverly found the garage empty. Tab 4. The legal pad photocopied page by page. Tab 5. The audio recording transcript from the illegal emergency board meeting, typed out by Sal with timestamps. Tab 6. The Ohio Revised Code Section 11333.41 statute, with the relevant provisions highlighted. Tab 7. The Crane Interiors LLC business registration pulled from public record, with the box label photographs from day 1, alongside it, showing staging Master Suite Lot 7 and staging Living Room Hartwell account, confirming that the stored items were commercial client inventory and not personal belongings. Tab 8. The Governing Documents section, prohibiting board members from adjudicating disputes in which they held a direct personal or financial interest, with the specific language underlined. Tab 9. The County Assessor Inquiry Notice, and my handwritten timeline, connecting it to Beverly's parking lot statement. Tab 10. The Facebook post screenshots including Beverly's deleted post, Hal's comment, and the deletion timestamp. 51 pages total. It smelled like fresh printer ink and completed work. I set it on the kitchen table and looked at it for a long moment. Then I went to bed. The Birchwood Commons annual homeowners meeting was 3 weeks away. Any homeowner with a documented governance complaint could present it to the full membership during the election segment of the meeting. On the record, before the vote, under the governing documents Beverly herself had been administering for 5 years. I confirmed my attendance. 4 days before the meeting, Beverly came to my door one final time. Gerald was with her, standing slightly behind and to her left, hands in his jacket pockets, in the posture of a man fulfilling an obligation he did not design. The garden had gone dormant for the season. He had nothing to tend and looked like he missed it. Beverly offered me $300 in a white envelope. She said she acknowledged there had been some miscommunication on both sides. She said she wanted to move forward as neighbors. She used the word community twice. $300. After $870 in documented direct costs. After 7 months of free commercial storage at market rate. After the parking lot threat and the 14 texts and the $4,200 demand letter from Harold Fry of the Heavy Cream Stationery. I looked at the envelope. I looked at her smile. I said, "I will think about it," and closed the door. I stood in the hallway in the quiet for a moment. Then I went to the kitchen table, opened the legal pad, and wrote, "Offered $300, filed claim for $870. She knows she is losing." I closed the legal pad, made a cup of coffee, and began thinking carefully about what I was going to say in front of 41 of my neighbors in 3 weeks. The Birchwood Commons annual homeowners meeting drew 44 people. In a development of 93 homes, where the average monthly board meeting pulls maybe 12 neighbors into a room that smells like burnt coffee and collective resignation, 44 people on a cold December Tuesday night means word had gotten around in the specific and purposeful way that word gets around when people have been waiting for something without quite knowing they were waiting for it. Every folding chair was taken. 3 people stood along the back wall. Someone had brought their own chair from home, a canvas camp chair that they had unfolded with the calm deliberateness of a person who had planned for this. The fluorescent lights hummed their familiar frequency. The coffee was burnt because it is always burnt, and because some things in a community center are beyond the reach of governance reform. Dana Pruitt, from the Westerville Courier, sat in the second row with a small notebook and a digital recorder on the seat beside her. She had the particular stillness of a reporter who has learned that the best thing you can do at a contentious public meeting is stay very quiet and let the room do the work. Beverly saw Dana the moment she walked to the front table. she said, loudly enough for the first 4 rows to hear. Who invited the press? Several people looked at each other. Hal Mercer said, mildly, and without looking up from his governing document copy. It is a public meeting, Beverly. Beverly straightened her blazer. December, still linen. I will never stop finding that detail remarkable. She called the meeting to order and ran the early agenda with the practiced authority of a woman who has been doing this for 5 years and intends to keep doing it. Treasurer's report. Committee updates. Pool enclosure maintenance schedule for the spring. She moved through it with the smooth efficiency of a person who believes the ground beneath her is solid, who has not yet registered the specific quality of silence in a room where 44 people are waiting for one particular moment on the agenda. She did not look at me. She did not look at Hal. She looked at her agenda and her 3 board members, and she ran that room the way she had always run it, like it was hers. When the meeting reached the election segment and the floor opened for governance comments, I stood up. I was wearing a clean flannel shirt. I had the binder under my arm. I thanked the room for their time. I said I had a governance complaint to present before voting proceeded, and that I would be as brief and specific as the documentation allowed. My voice was level. I have stood in louder rooms than a Birchwood Commons community center. I have read measurements off instruments in conditions that do not permit error. This was 44 neighbors, and a woman in a linen blazer, who had made a sequence of increasingly poor decisions. I began with the timeline. The Sunday afternoon cookie visit in late February. The moving truck at 6:55 the following morning. 19 boxes. 1 treadmill. 1 clothing rack. 1 Persian rug. The 2 unanswered texts. The 7 months. The $720 in parking payments. The violation notice. The certified demand letter. The lien rights. Item by item. Date by date. Dollar by dollar. The voice of a man reading a work order, not performing outrage, just accounting for what happened in the order that it happened. The room was completely quiet. The coffee maker had stopped dripping. When I reached the illegal emergency board meeting, Hal produced his phone and played 30 seconds of audio. Beverly's voice, clear and unmistakable, overriding Hal's bylaw objection on an improperly noticed session, pushing a vote through with 3 rubber stamps, while Hal's single dissenting vote sat on the record like a monument to patience. 2 people in the audience exchanged a look. One woman near the middle of the room put her hand to her mouth, not in shock, in recognition. The specific expression of someone hearing confirmed what they had suspected for longer than they realized. When I placed the Crane Interiors LLC business registration next to the box label photographs, staging Master Suite Lot 7 and staging Living Room Hartwell account, and explained what those labels meant in plain language, that the items in my garage had not been personal belongings from a home renovation, but commercial client inventory belonging to a registered for-profit business, the room shifted. Not dramatically, not loudly, just a degree or two in the way that the air in an enclosed space shifts, when the collective understanding of something changes all at once. When I laid out the county assessor timeline, Beverly's Cadillac in the municipal building parking lot, Walt's observation noted with time and date, the assessor inquiry arriving 14 days later, Beverly said for the first time all evening, "That is not accurate." Her voice was tight. The glacial control had developed a crack in it, thin as a hairline fracture, but visible to anyone who had been watching her manage rooms for 5 years, and knew what composed looked like on her face. From somewhere near the back of the room, clearly, and without drama, a man said, "Let him finish." I finished. I placed a copy of the 3-page binder summary in front of each board member, and one in front of Dana Pruitt. Then I said the thing I had decided 3 weeks earlier, while building the binder at my kitchen table, thinking about what I actually wanted from all of this. Not revenge, not drama, not the particular performance of public humiliation that some people in my position would have found satisfying. I said, I want the fine reversed, the lien satisfied, and a governance review, so that what happened here cannot happen to the next person sitting in these chairs. Then I sat down. 44 neighbors applauded. Not thunderously. Not a standing ovation. The genuine unperformed sound of people who have recognized something true and want to acknowledge it without theatrics. Beverly attempted a rebuttal. She used the words personal vendetta and procedural irregularities. She mentioned community standards twice. And then Paul Briggs, the board's insurance representative, the man who had seconded every motion Beverly had made for 2 years without visible deliberation, looked down at the binder summary in front of him, looked back up at Beverly, and said 7 words. "I think we need a governance review." 7 words from Paul Briggs. In the fluorescent light and the burnt coffee smell of the Birchwood Commons Community Center, on a Tuesday in December, that was the sound of the foundation giving way. The election was tabled. The governance review was formally moved and seconded. Hal seconded it before the motion was fully out of Paul's mouth. His expression was the expression of a man who has been waiting 3 years for a specific thing to happen, and is now watching it happen exactly as he predicted, with no visible satisfaction and complete internal satisfaction simultaneously. 3 weeks later, I received a default judgment in Franklin County Small Claims Court for $870 plus filing costs. Beverly did not appear. The judgment was entered, printed, and placed in the legal pad folder behind everything else. It was the least dramatic $870 I have ever collected, and also in some ways, the most meaningful. The governance review took 7 weeks. An independent reviewer appointed through the Ohio HOA oversight process went through everything: the binder, the recordings, the governing document provisions, the board meeting records going back 22 months. She was thorough and methodical, and produced a report in the particular dry language of official findings that was, within the constraints of that language, about as clear as such documents get. 3 formal findings. First, the emergency board meeting had been improperly convened, and all resolutions passed during it were void. Second, the violation notice issued to Ray Kowalski had been signed by a board officer with a direct personal and financial interest in the cited condition, in violation of the governing charter's conflict of interest provisions, and was therefore invalid and formally reversed. Third, the board was required to implement a written conflict of interest disclosure and recusal policy within 90 days, with compliance reported to the oversight body. The findings were public record the day they were released. Dana Pruitt published her story in the Westerville Courier the following week. Thorough, fair, fully sourced from the documentation I had provided, and the public record findings. 2 regional outlets picked it up within 5 days. The headline on the second pickup read, "HOA President fined neighbor for clutter, caused by her own business inventory." It was accurate. It was not gentle. Beverly did not comment publicly. At the January board meeting, she announced she was stepping back from her board role to focus on personal priorities. She read a prepared statement in the same measured tone she used for everything, the blazer in place, the voice steady, the particular dignity of a person who has decided that composure in retreat is the only remaining option available. She did not apologize. She did not address the room. She folded the statement, set it on the table, and left before the meeting concluded. Gerald, by all accounts, looked like a man who had been quietly waiting for this moment, for longer than anyone in the room realized, and who was already thinking about what he was going to do with his garden in the spring. Crane Interiors LLC was dissolved 4 months later. The Ohio Secretary of State's Business Registry updated the status to inactive on a Thursday morning, which I noted when I checked it that afternoon, not out of vindication, but out of the habit of a man who follows things through to their documented conclusion. Hal Mercer was elected interim board president by acclamation at the February meeting. His first act was to distribute the complete governing documents to every homeowner in Birchwood Commons. All 93 households, something that had not been done in 6 years. His second act was to reduce the minor violation administrative fine from $90 to $25, and to add a mandatory phone call step before any written notice could be issued. His third act was to establish a resident finance oversight committee with rotating annual membership and mandatory independent audit requirements. Small changes. Quiet changes. The kind that do not generate headlines but make the difference between a neighborhood that functions and one that merely maintains the appearance of functioning. In the first full year under Hal's governance, Birchwood Commons issued 9 violation notices. 9. In a development of 93 homes. Down from an average of over 300 per year under Beverly's administration. My truck came back to my garage in February. First time in 9 months. I pulled it in on a Saturday morning, parked it in its spot, with the 8 inches of clearance on each side, and stood there for a minute, just looking at it. Clean concrete, machine oil and solder in the air, every tool in its labeled place on the panel boards. 11 years of work, still exactly right. Some things are worth the effort of protecting. Walt Gibney suggested the Saturday morning gatherings that spring, the informal kind that had begun happening naturally in my garage over coffee and conversation, the kind that form when a neighborhood has been through something together, and people find they actually want to be in the same space without an agenda. He suggested making it a regular thing, a skills exchange, rotating between garages and driveways, neighbors teaching each other practical things, basic electrical, plumbing diagnostics, small engine maintenance, furniture repair, the kind of knowledge that used to pass between neighbors as a matter of ordinary course, and had somewhere along the way become rare. We called it the Birchwood Skills Exchange. The first session drew 11 people. The second drew 18. By April, we had more interest than available Saturday mornings. Hal's board formally endorsed it and allocated $400 from the community fund for materials and supplies. The sessions smelled like good coffee and sawdust and engine grease, and the particular warmth of a space where people are learning something useful from someone who is glad to teach it. At Walt's suggestion, we established a small scholarship alongside it. The Birchwood Trade Scholarship, funded by voluntary contributions from neighbors, awarded annually to a graduating local high school senior pursuing vocational or technical certification. The first year's award was $600. It went to a 17-year-old named Marcus, who intended to become a licensed electrician. I shook his hand at the small ceremony we held in my garage on a Saturday morning in May. Folding chairs set up in the space where Beverly Crane's Persian rug had sat for 7 months. The sealed concrete floor clean and level beneath us. The panel boards on the walls with every circuit labeled in the system I had built over 11 years. The legal pad was in the filing cabinet in the house. The binder was on the shelf above it. The small claims judgment was filed behind everything else in the folder. $870 plus costs, collected and documented and finished. I looked at Marcus holding his scholarship letter and thought about the Sunday afternoon in February when Beverly appeared at my door with a plate of store-bought cookies and a smile that did not reach her eyes. And I thought about everything that had followed from that moment. The 19 boxes, the legal pad, the certified mail, the Facebook listing, the 44 neighbors in folding chairs, the governance review, the 9 violation notices in a full year, and this. A kid with a scholarship heading into the trade I spent 31 years in, funded in part by the neighborhood coming together in the aftermath of something that had tried to divide it. Beverly Crane had used my garage as a free warehouse for 7 months, issued me a fine for the condition she created, and threatened me with a county reassessment when I asked for my money back. What she had not accounted for, what people like Beverly never account for, is what happens when the person they have chosen to underestimate turns out to be someone who writes things down. If you are dealing with an HOA situation that feels wrong, start a folder. Write down every date. Keep every receipt. Photograph every notice. Request records in writing by certified mail, and save the tracking numbers. Find out who owns the management contracts. Find out what financial relationships exist between the board members and the vendors your association pays. Look up your state's HOA statutes. Most of them are public record, and most of them give you more rights than the people running your association want you to know you have. The information is almost always available. The pattern is almost always visible once you start looking. Most people never start looking because they believe the system is too settled, too protected, too quietly powerful to challenge from the inside. Beverly Crane built her entire operation on that assumption. She was right about most of the 93 households in Birchwood Commons. She was wrong about the one on Sycamore Bend with the sealed concrete floor and the labeled panel boards and a legal pad in the second kitchen drawer. One Facebook Marketplace listing posted at 9:22 at night. By 6 the next morning, every box, every rack, every piece of commercial staging inventory was distributed across Columbus in the hands of strangers who thought they had found the best free pickup of their lives. Beverly showed up in the morning and found clean concrete. That is the image I want you to hold, not the meeting, not the judgment, not even the governance review findings. Just a woman standing in an empty garage, trying to understand how a situation she believed she controlled had resolved itself completely without her permission, while she was asleep. The notebook always outlasts the blazer. Know the law. Write it down.